Testament of Menoth. When the man known only as the High Reclaimer pushed open the gates of Emmer and disappeared into the blasted waste of the Stormlands, most believed he had gone to his death. Many feared he had chosen to reclaim himself in this time of great need. They were not wholly mistaken. Battling the whipping winds and flesh-scoring sands of the marches, the High Reclaimer pushed himself to the limits of life to open the forgotten and unseen gates of Urcaen through which he would be reborn. Stepping into the dominion of the dead, beyond the walled city of man where the faithful are protected in death, he waded through relentless hordes of the unclaimed, suffering terrible wounds as they clawed at him for the warmth of his living body. He fought back the press with his weapon cremator, baptizing it in the ephemeral ichor of ghosts and fallen souls and transforming the metal with every strike, earning it a new subsequent requiem. Finally, the dead thinned and revealed an ancient tomb-like city, a shadow of Icthir, inscribed with Menite scriptures never before seen by mortal eyes. The throng of ancient faithless was thwarted at the perimeter of this hallowed ground, allowing the High Reclaimer some respite to discover the temple dedicated to the Creator. At his arrival, the heavy doors of the vast shrine opened, revealing a lone tablet atop an ancient altar, the Omegas. Lifting the ancient tablet from its resting place of eons, the High Reclaimer began to read the text inscribed there in a tongue of unknown to man. His mind reeled as it filled with the Creator's law of the dead, saturated with holiness as old as life itself, and imbued with the knowledge of those who wield it. The High Reclaimer set out to pass through Urcaen's gates back into the world of the living. He was prepared for the arduous return through the masses, but when the High Reclaimer exited the temple, he found an army of Menite souls holding back the restless tides. Fallen soldiers of the faith had cleared a path for him. As he walked, they moved with him as a barrier against the raging unfaithful. As one fell, two more replaced it, until the High Reclaimer again reached the gates between the worlds. Once again, among the living, the High Reclaimer has become something else, a testament of Menoth's will. He was bestowed the title by the Harbinger, his given name buried so that he exists only as the embodiment of the true law. Clad in new vestments and wielding his otherworldly weapon, the Testament of Menoth is a champion of a faith unlike any other. Having accomplished the impossible, crossing the gates between life and death, he is able to step between those worlds for a short time without paying heed to either the long as a soul lights his way. The Testament's divine power was forged in the fire of the sacred oaths and tempered by the ancient words writ on the Omegas. With a mere gesture, he can draw back the curtains between the worlds to return fallen Menites to life and banish infidel souls to the hellish wastelands of Urcaen, far from the reach of their lesser gods. The living fear him, the dead remember him, and Menoth's will guides him. The Testament has come to bring a new word to the realm of man. Well, that seems terrifying, because anybody that ever ends up in Urcaen, or at least the living people that end up in Urcaen, usually come back a little tainted or crazy, but I guess this man's faith allowed him to wade through all these terrible creatures and just make him stronger. And he did not come back as a Grimkin or a defiler, so that's always good for him, especially, I guess, since he already went in with the faith of Menoth with him, it kind of gave him more strength. But yeah, he is a terrifying man to behold now, and he can't speak of it because, of course, he is a reclaimer, so they don't talk anyway. But yeah, his will shall be done. But let's see what the Mark III to Mark IV changes have in store for this guy. Alrighty, well, it appears he is very similar to his earlier renditions. We'll start with his stat line. Alrighty, his stat line is he's still speed 5, so he's still pretty slow. He still has his focus 6 from his last rendition. His mat is still upgraded to a 7, so he's still a melee combatant. His defense is still a 14. His arm is still a 16. His control range is still a 12. His abilities on him, he still has he has Apparition, which during your control phase he can move 2 inches from his current location. He still has Soul Reclaimer, so he still gains the soul like he did in his earlier rendition. So anybody in his control range that dies, he gains their soul. Alright. He still has Spell Word from his earlier rendition. Earlier being Mark III, not his previous. He still has soul wards, so enemy models cannot gain soul tokens from friendly models destroyed within 6 of him. It used to be 5 in Mark 3, so now it is 6 inches. That's good. And then in Mark 6, they gave him an additional ability called Soul Phase. So this model can spend soul tokens at any time during his activation to gain incorporeal for 1 round, which is fantastic because not very many models have magical weapons to be able to hit incorporeal models. So yeah, that makes that even better. He has Requiem, which was what his Premator advanced to. It's not really that different outside of it. I don't believe it has its special ability anymore. Well, it didn't have a special ability to begin with. So it's still causes continuous fire, and it's still a POW 14 damage and still a range 2. So that is that for that weapon. His feet didn't really change at all. His still Essence of Dust. So it might read a little differently, but it's basically the same. Friendly faction models currently in his control range gain incorporeal, and when declaring a charge or slam attacks, or when making attacks, friendly faction models can ignore models while in his control range when determining line of sight, so they can run through people. Now, of course, I believe incorporeal models do not have a melee range when it comes to attack opportunities, so they don't lose their attack when they're moving through. But honestly, not entirely sure. You're gonna have to check that in your own game. You're gonna have to check that in the book, because just going off what I remember at this point. Because I know I usually use breakthrough whenever I'm going incorporeal to kind of fix that, but if I didn't have to use that, it'd be cool, but I'm not entirely sure. But then his spells are basically unchanged. Now, one of them actually changed a little bit of how it's spelled out, or what it does, but it's the same name. So we still have Cloak of Ash, which target friendly model / unit gains Ashen Veil, and the Ashen Veil gives them concealment, so they get a +2 to their defense. But then when living enemy models without resistance to fire are within melee range, they suffer a -2 to their attack rolls. So it's kind of like concealment and then additional concealment for melee, which is kind of nice. One of the ones that changed would be Dust to Dust has been changed to Death of Dust, and Death of Dust just removes boxed model from play, which also removes its body and removes its soul token. It used to be Dust to Dust, which still RFP'd the model, but then the original one left an AoE in its place, so no longer does that. Then he has Hollowed Avenger, so he can give target cohort model in his battle group Righteous Vengeance. So if a friendly faction model is destroyed while within 5 of that model, during maintenance phase, that model can move 3 inches and make an attack. So that's awesome. And then of course we have Revive, took over Raise the Dead, which is basically the same. Target 1 friendly model, trooper model, and then you can return 1 destroyed grunt to that model's unit. You got to place them within 2, and they have to forfeit either its movement or its combat action that turn when it's returned. And yeah, basically just a 4 spell caster. So he's a great melee caster. He has some controls. He can bring people back from the dead, and he hands out and his ability to hand out incorporeal to his whole army is kind of insane. Because yeah, that's something Menoth did not need, is for them to be able to walk their troops through other people's troops. But there you go, you got it. And yeah, he is phenomenal of a caster. He looks cool. His model looks cool. And he would be fun to play, especially his ability to give himself incorporeal just randomly. It's kind of nice.